So last week I began a discussion on authenticity, and going to talk a little bit more about that today and maybe focus on barriers, what gets in the way of us being authentic, what are some of the obstacles. I think it's important to know what those are because most people find that they are attracted to people who express themselves authentically, and then we find that it's maybe something that we want to do, but it's kind of confusing. So, because I didn't record last week, I'll kind of go through a couple of the ways we're talking about it. And there's really just also to say that's an interesting phenomenon is authenticity would be considered a virtue of modernity. As a virtue or as maybe something that has a sila dimension to it, an ethical dimension to it, it's relatively new. The ancient world didn't talk so much about these ideas very much. And I think because of the modern discourse and the media and the ways that we're plugged into the internet and devices and so forth, it's become a very important concept and has, of course, like most important concepts, has been watered down to some degree. Um, so, in its most basic sense, the kind of three domains we talk about would be authenticity as just a general disposition, as just a way that we move through the world, which is probably the long-term goal. Is it just something that we embody that's more easeful? We're able to present ourselves in honest ways. We don't get so caught up in trying to strategize how we're being perceived, how we want to be perceived, which I'm sure you've noticed is quite exhausting. Then there's this other dimension to it, which we call therapeutic authenticity, which is really about therapy. It's about being able to express to other people, not necessarily a therapeutic professional, but being able to have insight into your struggle and being able to talk about hard things in an honest and meaningful way, which is a really important aspect of this, being able to have conversations that are meaningful, but that are maybe even hard or challenging. And then there's the psychosocial element, which is probably where it has arisen in modern discourse around a virtue of modernity, because it's the psychosocial element. Just to say this, I think it's important, is I think for authenticity to actually be fully expressed, it needs to be pro-social. Like you can't be an asshole. You can't be an asshole if your authenticity gets, you can't, because we see people like that. So I think we have to be clear about that. It really does have to be pro-social, which meaning that we're contributing to the world and it's about how we engage with other people in a way that's rooted in something like kindness or friendliness. I think it's important to say that. So we're not talking about the authenticity that they would call adolescent authenticity, like the kind of the rebellious teenager who's trying to, uh, you know, individuate. That's part of it. That's probably where it begins for many of us, but that's not really the full fruition of it. That's maybe the beginning point. Um, so it's not necessarily adolescent experience. It's about individuation. It's really about this thing, and I want to read this thing because it's becoming I wouldn't say it's becoming popular, but it's been coming up in some of my searches because I've been looking for this stuff, which is called authentic intelligence. Um, so just to read a few things about this that I think are interesting. The book Emotional Intelligence was published in 1995. It is still on the bestsellers list of the New York Times, yet the idea has made very little impact on modern society. Authentic intelligence is the other AI, and it emphasizes the unique capabilities of the human mind rather than depending on external and artificial models of happiness. Rooted in emotional intelligence, creativity, and self awareness or mindfulness, it has arisen to counteract the destructive potential of artificial intelligence by empowering individuals to live a more meaningful, ethical, and fulfilling lives, while also contributing to a more caring and collaborative world. Now, that sounds pretty good, doesn't it? So, there's a way in which we can think about this as a way of operating that can be done. So, so it's kind of talk about what gets in the way of this. Why would it be hard to do this? I think the distinction that's made here which is a distinction I've been making for a long time, mostly because I grew up down the street from Daniel Goleman. Um, Probably the primary skill associated with authenticity is emotional intelligence, um, which many people hear that word. It sounds important or interesting, but the truth of the matter is, as a society and a culture, we are so not emotionally intelligent. It's actually tragic. Um, People have very, very, very little awareness around their emotional life. And so, just to give us a sense of what if I were emotionally intelligent, how would I know what would be happening? Um, for anybody to even begin to develop emotional intelligence, if you have to know when you've become emotional. Um, we're also too, we're not always emotional, and we're mostly not emotional. We have 3, 5, 7 emotional episodes a day. It's usually experienced in usually we get upset about something, we have a perceived setback, we become emotional, and most people don't know when they become emotional and have that self-awareness of like, oh, I'm emotional right now. I should probably be careful about what I do or say. And if we look back at our day, when we look back and we have regrettable emotional episodes, usually when you do something that you wish you didn't do, maybe you said something or you didn't say something, or you did something or you didn't do something, you look back on that and go, man, I really wish I'd handled that differently. What the reason why that happened is there was an emotional experience that you didn't track, you didn't notice that. So we really need to know when we've become emotional. If we do that, we can learn how we need to be able to choose our response, which is so hard. Because what happens when we become emotional, we don't choose our response, we react. We become emotional, we get upset, and when we react, we just engage in whatever shitty behavior we engaged in last time. It's like when we become reactive emotionally, we just kind of do the same thing, and that gets really irritating and frustrating. So we need to develop choice. In cultivating emotional balance, the metric that we use is awareness plus choice equals freedom. And authenticity is related to freedom. And freedom is about me being able to choose how I respond in a heated situation that's emotional. And then if we can kind of know when we become emotional, we can choose a better response. Then the mindfulness piece becomes very important, because now what we want to do is we want to increase the gap between stimulus and response, right? So the gap, something happens, right? Really quick. I become angry. And I know that I'm angry, and then I kind of can go into a mindfulness. I'm like, okay, I'm angry. I a lot of times say stupid shit when I'm angry. Uh, I make mistakes. I react. So I need to be in that gap awareness, the classic Viktor Frankl statement. So we have to increase the gap. And this is also really interesting. This stuff irritates me because nobody seems to be paying attention to this, which makes me insane, because I don't know how we can function without it. Is when you look at the research, in which has been, I don't know, 4,000 peer-reviewed articles now on the benefits of mindfulness. Uh, I don't know that it's true in everyone, but I will say that from what I've gathered, at least it's 90% or north of all the research studies they do on the benefits of mindfulness. In the top 5, you always see what a mindfulness allows us to do is to emotionally regulate. So, from a secular point of view, one of the main benefits of mindfulness is that we become more emotionally intelligent. We're better able to regulate the emotions. Now, why that doesn't become focused on more as being so important and so crucial is a little bit odd to me. I think in a comical sense, I think because we don't really like our emotions very much. We don't want the solution to having a fulfilling, meaningful life be around skills around emotions. We want we want another option, right? We don't want the problem to be emotional, and I am sorry, but by and large, it certainly is. So if we think about what makes this so hard, what are some of the obstacles to authenticity? The first one, of course, is emotional reactivity. If we don't have a sense of our emotional landscape, our emotional profile, we'll react. And we can react in a couple of different ways. So emotions are complicated. We can react by so so actually not doing anything is a kind of reactivity. Suppression can be a reactivity. So we have to be careful that when we think about, so if we talk about emotional reactivity, we could be talking about destructive emotions. And destructive emotions can be enacted in hyper ways. So there's a kind of an indulgence. And if I'm angry, I explode, I yell, I scream. Emotions can be acted destructively by kind of overdoing the emotional experience. But they also can be destructive. Emotional reactivity can also be a suppression of the emotional experience. So some people who are like really repressed emotionally, who tend to be kind of at ease and they don't react that much, we might think that they're equanimous and they don't get upset. But but smushing the emotion down is also reactive. So if you feel like you're an emotional suppressor, and you think, well, I don't react emotionally, you're totally wrong about that. That's just a different kind of reaction, right? Which also has um, outcomes and side effects that are not really effective. So again, with mindfulness, we need to find a middle way between indulging the emotional experience and suppressing the emotional experience. So we have to let it, we actually, interestingly enough, we need to let the emotion express itself authentically. I'm angry right now. I know that I'm angry right now. I'm probably going to get angry again. Can I choose what I want to do right now? Can I choose my response to this emotional experience? That doesn't include yelling and screaming or overreacting, but also doesn't mean I'm going to suppress it. Now, this is really, really the thing about this that's so annoying. Again, it's really, really complicated to learn how to do this. And at the same time, it's actually not that hard. The key here always is mindfulness or self-awareness. If you don't know that if you become emotional and don't know that, you're not aware of it, then chances are you're just going to do whatever you did last time. And then we get into these dead ends around reactivity. So we really need to have a good understanding of the emotional life. And that's kind of and so in these emotional experiences, we tend to we get defensive, which is an inauthentic move. We get really defensive, or we get blaming, or we live in, especially nowadays, sort of what happens. The most inauthentic expression uh, that we see in modern society and culture is a constant sense of victimhood. Everybody's a fucking victim now, which is like a non-willingness to take any responsibility for our emotional reactivity. I'm upset, and it's the world's fault that I'm upset. Right? It's that way of every time I'm having an unpleasant feeling, it's somebody else's fault. And this is a huge problem. It's more so true for younger folks, but it's as anti-emotional intelligence as you can actually get. The other way in which we can become, which also plays into this, inauthentic or obstacles to it, is ways in which we have fixed views about things. We're not open-minded. Or a lot of times these fixed views are what they would call Sakkaya Ditthi, which is self-view, is that's just the way I am. I'm always like this. I'm just an angry guy. I'm just a traumatized person. I'm just, I'm an alcoholic. I'm whatever I am. I'm like this. This is just how it is. This is just how I am. It's not going to change. I'm not interested in changing it. You just need to accept me. It's almost like too much self-acceptance, you know. And then it's also behind that is a belief that actually there's not much I can do about it. It's a very non-humble experience. It's not opening to being different or changing or looking at some of the causes of these things. We get kind of locked into, well, this is just how I am. This is just how it is. It's in what they would call an enacted truth claim. We believe certain things are true about ourselves. We believe certain things are true about our world. And we make an assessment of like, this is just how it is. And I'm just operating uh, appropriately. I'm just doing the best I can. I'm not interested in being different. I'm not interested in talking about it. I'm right, you're wrong. It's another way that emotions are enacted in destructive ways because I'm not interested in the conversation. I'm not interested in collaboration. I'm just kind of fixed and locked into that. And we can be dictated by that in ways that are subtle, and also ways that are obvious. The subtle ones are hard because they're not necessarily easy to see, and we don't always notice when we're doing it. Um, and so this all the time happens in conversations and relationships with other people. Another way that I don't have this so much, thank God, because I know a lot of people who struggle with this. And I'm glad that I don't because it looks pretty painful. Is people pleasing. Is trying to do things, which is really kind of a really obvious way of inauthenticity because we end up doing things um, because it's kind of a conformity. There's a little paragraph on this in that Stanford article I sent you all last week, which they say many philosophical schools of thought are critical of our ingrained tendency to conform to the norms and expectations of the public world because it prevents us from being authentic or true to ourselves. An authentic life is one that is willing to break with tradition and social convention and courageously affirm the freedom and contingency of our own condition. It is generally understood to refer to a life lived with a sense of urgency and commitment based on meaning given projects that matter each of us individually. So, we can conform to society easily, but also we can just uh, act how we think other people want us to be. Right? And there's a way, and that can become very, very habituated and very, very problematic. Um, Other people talk about it. One of the things that they talk about in the Dharma space that falls into that is people talk about what do they call it? Um, when you're like when you're fake, it's a oh God, it's on the top of my head. I can't think of it. People talk about it all the time. They do Dharma talks on it all the time. They feel as if they're not worthy, or they're fake, or if someone thinks of it, let me know. I'm trying to think of the word, but that is another way that shows up where um, it's a lot of it is really self-doubt. It's a matter of it's not an inferiority complex. Oh man, it's gonna drive me crazy now. Imposter syndrome, Walanowski, thank you so much. That's exactly what I was looking for. Is that sense of imposter syndrome, which I actually have never had that. I'm glad because it looks painful. Because there's two sides of the coin of that, the imposter syndrome is that it happened a lot in like teacher training programs where people they didn't feel like they were worthy. And so on some level, imposter syndrome, you might have it because maybe on some level you're a little bit of an imposter, right? There might be some truth to it. So in which ways, so if there's a sense of imposterhood, in which ways am I showing up that actually aren't really true? I'm not really being authentic. So that there's the one side of it where there's always maybe a little bit of truth in these things. And then there's also just the self-doubt of just like, I don't feel worthy, or I don't feel like I'm measuring up, or I don't feel like I'm bringing that to the table. And so this kind of people pleasing, imposter syndrome stuff is slippery because on some level, part of it, in some ways, it might be true. In some ways, it might just be actually delusional. So the really the way out of this, the practice out of this one is just finding a couple of people that you know, and I'm sure you all have them, where you can practice where that's not the case, right? There are people that we have in our lives where we don't have that. We don't feel like we need to please them. We don't feel like we're imposters. We feel like we can show up as ourselves. And this is as good as it gets too, right? This is where we authentic becomes, we have authentic relationships, which a lot of this is a two-way street. Is that when you go out with people that you know that you spent a lot of time with, where you can go spend half an hour, you can have lunch, you can have coffee, and you can just really be in that space where none of this stuff I'm talking about happens. And so that's always the best place to practice that. And to just add one more thing on this before we open it up, because we'll be talking soon, is the best venue, the best part of the path that we practice that with is through voice, through speech, through finding our voice. So it's noticing. context. Maybe it's groups, people go to AA meetings, and that's why people love AA meetings. People generally share pretty authentically in a 12-step meeting. That's kind of like why we like to go. Uh, and so there's certain places where people are more likely to do that. So you want to be able to pay attention to those things. And you also want to learn to pay attention to and identify people that you know in your lives where you can go and have that experience and practice that. Um, because really that's the ultimate expression of it is how we express ourselves through words. And so we have to practice that and notice that when there are certain people and places where we can practice that. Blah, 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 blah. I think that's all I want to say about that. Um,